Is being closed-minded a bad thing? I ask this mostly because of how many times I personally have been called closed-minded, most of the time for reasons when and where I found the accusation to be not applicable, and also because I can only imagine that I'll be labeled as such in the future for my political and religious beliefs, if not already. I also ask it for other people's sake and just in general. I've been called this mostly, if not exclusively, by friends and family, and they say supposedly that they're not meaning it as an insult, when at the time I had only seen the term be used as a way to put down and insult conservatives just for being conservatives. I've always known being called closed-minded to be equivalent to being called stupid, as stupidity is not just ignorance but rather a step up from that, the meaning being unlearned and being unable or unwilling to learn. Thinking about all this has gotten to a point to where I'm seriously asking the question, is being closed-minded really a bad thing? Regardless of whether anybody intends their accusation of someone else being closed-minded as an insult or not. To be closed-minded is to be not open to any new ideas in the realm of politics, religion, and morals. In a more broad sense, it's to be unwilling to try new things. Like you used to hate Brussels sprouts when you were a kid and you refuse to try them again as an adult to see if your taste buds have changed. I think it's a little harsh to call somebody closed-minded when it comes to their own personal preference in food, but we'll run with it since that's how I've seen the term closed-minded be used before. But sticking to the subject of ideas, there are some cases where it's kind of expected that somebody wouldn't be open to an opposite position on a certain subject. For an extreme example, slavery. Nobody in modern society thinks it's even debatable on whether or not people get to own and control other people based off of arbitrary characteristics. Indented servitude is another example of slavery, but we're going to stick to the example of, say, the transatlantic slave trade, when black people weren't even in debt with white people, so therefore they were slaves. No, they were flat out kidnapped totally against their own will by other black people to be sold off to whitey. Nobody is open to the idea that any of this might be okay, nor should they. I don't think even alt-righters want to own black people. Worst they want to do is deport them, which is still pretty bad, but that aside. Slavery, among other extreme hot-button issues, is an example of society coming to an almost objective consensus that it's morally and ethically bad. But are we closed-minded for not even considering an opposite opinion on this? That it may well possibly be a good or at least okay thing to enslave most to all black people? If so, then this is an example of where being closed-minded is not bad, but in fact a good thing. But even then, I hesitate to call this closed-mindedness even. I say that the real reason why we all say slavery is bad is more because we all have a deeply held moral conviction within our hearts and minds that self-ownership is a good thing and shouldn't be tyrannically stomped on. Other people may not word it this exact way or even think about why slavery is bad, but nonetheless. Which brings me on to another example, the minimum wage. Say I've gone debating against somebody who's for raising it to $15 an hour, and you all know I'm not only against that, but also for abolishing the minimum wage entirely. And say by the end of the debate that it looks like the fight for 15 guy won. Would you all think then that I am closed-minded for not changing my position to, maybe we should raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour if not higher? I argue that it's not because I'm closed-minded why I don't change my stance on the minimum wage at that moment, but that it's because I have a deeply held moral and ethical conviction in my heart and mind that people's private property rights and freedom of association shouldn't be tyrannically violated, which is what implementing and raising the minimum wage effectively does, even if it looks on paper like overall society would experience a net gain from a minimum wage increase. Though I still believe it would be a net loss for society to raise the minimum wage, but I digress. Whether it be my position on minimum wage being bad, a leftist position on single-payer healthcare being good, or all our positions that slavery is immoral, I don't think any of us can hardly imagine a situation where we change our position on some deeply held belief. And that's really what I think is a response to if somebody calls anyone closed-minded for not changing their belief on something. It's not that I'm closed-minded, it's that I have a deeply held moral and ethical conviction that this is how the world should be, and I can't imagine there being a convincing enough argument to where I change my beliefs. Which is what brings me to my next point. Let's run along with the terminology of close-minded for right now. I'd argue there's such a thing as being too open-minded, quote unquote. Being open-minded is not inherently a virtue. You can be so open-minded to where that you change your original position on an issue by hearing or reading the weakest and flimsiest argument for the opposite position without the littlest bit of pushback. But the question is, did you really believe in that original position that you originally held? And this might come off as a little condescending, but a couple other questions by extension would be, do you have any real principles? Do you have any legitimate, deeply held convictions? Dare I say it that having no real principles is worse than being close-minded. In fact, this subject kind of cuts both ways. You're either so open-minded or just an unprincipled flip-flopper, or you're so convicted and passionate for your beliefs or just stubborn and close-minded. This is not to say that changing your mind and beliefs is bad, really. It can be a good thing sometimes. I'm just saying, don't be so open-minded to where you come off as an unprincipled flip-flopper, and if I or anyone else doesn't change their beliefs, don't just start automatically calling us close-minded. For anyone not changing their beliefs, they could be doing it for reasons they don't feel like revealing to you, or they can't really articulate or pinpoint the reason why and probably just need to think about it some more. But if we're really going to keep insisting that that is closed-minded, well then I guess being closed-minded is not a bad thing really, and we just need to get rid of the negative stigma of being called closed-minded. Hey, at least it's a sign of strength by this logic. But I think realistically, the only time it's really legitimate to call somebody closed-minded is if they're not being even open to even hearing you out on your opposite opinion of a certain subject. Not if they do hear you out, but by the end of hearing you out, they don't change their mind. Now that's pretty much all that I have to say. Now tell me you all in the comments section down below, am I going on about a non-issue, or do I actually bring up an interesting point and question to be talked about here? The Dark Conservatarian has been brought to you by patrons like you. I'd like to give a special thanks to Cat Chat, The Conundrum, and Mikhail the Stray Cat for all being such loyal followers and donating to me and for my work. And if you'd like to donate to this channel and all my other content creation, link to my Patreon page is down below with some patron rewards. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button, and if you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit subscribe and set that bell notification button to all. Hope to see you all later, and God bless.